is it possible that we could have religious people dedicating their entire lives to God? They're the professionals in the things of God, and yet their lives at times leave a lot to be desired. Many of them are good people, yes, and yet we expect more. We're not very much impressed by the way they live. I have to admit that as a boy, I never wanted to be a priest. I did not have any bad experiences with any priests, and yet I never felt attracted to imitate any of the priests that I knew. None of them seemed to be particularly exceptional individuals. We tend to expect much more. So we tend to conclude that either one of two is the case. Either we have not done a very good job in allowing God to work in us, or God doesn't have the power to transform us. Furthermore, if what we covered in the last insight was true about grace, if grace is this divine quality in our souls, divinizing our being and elevating it to participate of the divine nature, it follows that we should be a little bit more godly than what we appear. The problem is that even when we may be living in a state of grace and friendship with God, that divine influence in our lives may still be underdeveloped. It is called to grow and eventually to mature and give fruit. This is not an easy task. It requires the development of what we called infused virtues and gifts of the Holy Spirit. And right from the start, I have to admit that we have a communication problem. Today, people do not talk about virtues. Our culture has come to reject the notion that we can develop virtues. Yes, in a classical sense, a virtue is a habit, an internal disposition that makes it easier for someone to behave well. And we get it when we talk about the development of habits like cleanliness, industriousness, etc. However, beyond these habits, we talk about moral virtues that have to do with high moral standards like prudence, justice, temperance, and fortitude. These are habits that are not very easy to develop. As Christians, we have come to believe that even though these habits require our human effort, they would be impossible to develop fully without God infusing them in a supernatural way. This is what we mean by mature development of grace in our lives. Of course that God could act directly through us. However, it is not God's plan to direct us as if we were machines that He would be controlling and operating from the outside. That would imply God taking over and doing violence to our will. Instead, as we cooperate with His grace, He infuses in us these habits, these virtues, so we could act in a godly way, and He does this in a smooth way in line with our nature and our will. And so we talk about different types of infused virtues. First, we have the theological virtues, faith, hope, and charity. They have God as their object, and God infuses them in us so that we may believe in Him, trust Him, and love Him who is the end of our lives. Growth in these virtues requires our participation and our effort. And then we have the moral virtues like prudence, temperance, justice, and fortitude, and the other virtues that are sister virtues of these four main ones. They deal with the proper use of the world and everything it contains. We are to consider everything, all creatures, as means to grow in the love of God. The proper use of creatures is the object of these virtues. The use of them with a free heart requires a great attachment to God and detachment of creatures, as St. Ignatius wrote at the beginning of his spiritual exercises, where he said, God created human beings to praise, reverence, and serve God, and by doing this to save their souls. God created all other things on the face of the earth to help fulfill this purpose. From this it follows that we are to use the things of this world only to the extent that they help us to descend, and we ought to rid ourselves of the things of this world to the extent that they get in the way of descent. For this it is necessary to make ourselves indifferent to all created things as much as we are able, so that we do not necessarily want more health rather than sickness, riches rather than poverty, honor rather than dishonor, a long rather than a short life, and so in all the rest, so that we ultimately desire and choose only what is most conducive for us to the end for which God created us. And God's work in us still goes further. He also infuses in us some virtues to prepare our souls to easily receive the emotions of the Holy Spirit in a divine way. These special virtues are called gifts of the Holy Spirit. The difference with those other infused virtues that we're talking about is the following. Just like God infuses in us some virtues or habits so we may direct our behavior according to the dictates of reason enlightened by faith, so does He infuse in us other virtues or gifts of the Holy Spirit so we may direct our behavior according to the motions of the Holy Spirit. Imagine what it would be like if we could be so well disposed in our hearts so as to smoothly listen and follow to the inspirations of the Holy Spirit in a constant way. We would more easily become instruments of God in this world. And the gifts of the Holy Spirit are wisdom, understanding, counsel, fortitude, knowledge, piety, and fear of the Lord. These are found in chapter 11 of the book of Isaiah. These infused virtues and the gifts of the Holy Spirit spring from the grace that we receive in baptism. Sadly, they can remain underdeveloped. However, when they blossom in the life of an individual, that person can really reflect the wisdom of the Lord, a degree of fortitude and justice in a remarkable way. That's our goal. We will continue describing the path towards spiritual growth in the next insight.